Hello, this is a series of modules called A Guide Through the Classroom Assessment Process. This is Module 1, called An Introduction to Assessment. The Illinois Center for School Improvement, also known as Illinois CSI, has a mission for high-performing districts and high-achieving students. This work has also evolved to be embedded within the MTSS, also known as the Multi-Tiered System of Support. We also support districts in maintaining their focus on high achievement for all students, including an MTSS framework through a commitment to continuous improvement. These are our section outcomes. Please take a moment to read the 4 items. This module will provide educators with considerations in developing rigorous standards-based assessment items. Also, ways to identify and describe different types of assessment items for formative and summative assessments. Participants will also learn assessment types to skills and to be able to assess the level of rigor of those assessment types. And there will also be an application of the concepts learned to a blueprint for planning. What is assessment? Take a moment to read the 4 items listed here. So there are many reasons that we assess students, and there are many types of assessments. When you think about why we assess students, the main reason is we want to make sure that they have mastered the standards that we are using in our classrooms. But it also is very important that we consider giving feedback to the learner so that they can continue to grow throughout the process of mastering standards. Why do we assess students? There are many reasons that we can talk about. Take a moment to read the ones we have listed here. We know that we assess students to, as we said before, to make sure that we know what they have learned. We also want to assess how teachers have taught the material. We're able to determine mastery, and we're also able to promote learner engagement. It is important to measure what students know. Take a moment to read this quote. So the last part, the part that talks about designing assessments, is what we are going to focus on today. The continuum of assessment. So we know that there is a continuum of assessment. You go from the formative assessments that can be given daily, weekly, or monthly, and then you have those summative assessments that are given at the end of a unit, at the end of a quarter, and also at the end of a school year. Formative assessments, as you see the list here, can go from teaching and planning to how we group our students to making sure that we're differentiating our instruction. The process for summative assessments, as we see here, have a range all the way from what we do to the classroom to college entrance exams. These purposes lead us to different practices and strategies for assessment. Formative assessments, we see that it provides feedback. It also provides feedback to students as well as teachers. And as I said before, can take place daily, weekly, or monthly in classrooms. Summative assessments, as we discussed, happen less frequently than our formative assessments. And as we see in the last bullet, it provides a bit more data and information for our school, district, state, as well as mastery of our state standards. So here again, we see a continuum of assessment examples. Take a moment to read those examples. I like to show this slide often to teachers who may be a little intimidated by the word assessment or data, to see that you assess your students all the time. You check for understanding by asking questions. You have in-class assignments or exit tickets, entrance tickets. Your homework is a form of assessment. There are many things all the way to the end of the spectrum with state assessments that we use to assess mastery of our standards and to see where our students are. Now we're going to go into assessment design. Take a moment to read the slide. The word assessment refers to the processes and tools that measure what students know and can do. The term includes everything from the questions you ask your students during class discussions to statewide standardized tests. Think about other ways that you assess students. Designing assessments is one of the many complex tasks that teachers take on as professionals. The modules are designed to empower all teachers, pre-kindergarten through grade 12, to become fluent assessment designers so that they can do an even better job of helping their students learn the course content throughout the school year. These series of modules will help you to plan, write, assess, and select assessments that give you a clear sense of what your students are learning. So we see here that there are 5 elements of assessment design. We will take the time to go through each one of them. An assessment that is aligned with standards and measures student performance against those standards. An assessment has an appropriate level of rigor if the assessment includes assessment items that match the level of rigor or the skill or skills you intend to measure. The assessment measures a range of student thinking and understanding so that it measures what all students know and can do. So once again, of the 5 elements, we're talking about alignment to standards and then the level of rigor that we are using to measure what students know and can do. The additional 3 elements of assessment design are listed here: precision, bias, and scoring. When we think about precision, we want to make sure that we're measuring students' knowledge and skills. When we think about bias, an unbiased assessment measures students' knowledge and skills. A bias assessment is geared toward a certain particular type of student. Scoring is also able to measure students' knowledge and skills accurately and appropriately. When we think about scoring, if a team comes together and you are measuring a social studies essay, if you have a strong rubric and take the time to calibrate scores with others who will be willing to grade the papers, it shouldn't matter whether you have Mrs. Smith, the notoriously easy grader, or super strict Mrs. Jones, who grades student papers. When you have a reliable rubric, the rubric will determine the score. The assessment blueprint. The assessment blueprint is designed to help you map out what and how you want to assess your students, what you want to assess them on, the purpose, and what it is that you are trying to find out about where your students are in mastering the standards. So we see on this blueprint here that you start off with section 1 that has the primary purpose of your assessment. Is it formative? Is it summative? Is it a diagnostic where you just want to see where your students are? You would put that in number 1. Then the standards that you want to address would go in rows in section number 2. What skills are you trying to determine mastery for? And then the level of rigor. You can use Bloom's taxonomy or you can use Webb's depth of knowledge in this section here for number 4. And then the test items that you want to use. Is it going to be multiple choice, constructive response? Is it going to be some form of performance task that you are using to measure mastery of the standards? And then at the bottom, you are selecting your test items there, and you just follow going across the item, the standard, the type of item that it is. Once again, is it a multiple choice? Is it a short response? The level of rigor, the number of points that you're giving that item, and the percentage of the assessment that this item will entail. Okay, so I thought that it was important to also just include a definition for each section. So you can use the previous slide as a template, and then you have your blueprint defined here. So once again, the purpose of your assessment, your standards, the skills that you are assessing based on what's written in the standard, whether it's critical thinking skills, whether it's a writing skill that you are assessing, whether it's a mastery of fractions or percentages, equations, what skill is it that you are assessing? Again, the level of rigor, assessment items, and then again going down to more detail on those assessment items that you're using. So using the blueprint helps us to begin with the end in mind, as we are all familiar with. Take a moment to read the backward design process. As we see that these steps show a process of backward design in which you first determine which standard or standards you plan to measure. Second, you design your assessment to measure mastery of the standard or standards. And third, you plan your instruction. The blueprint can help teachers to plan what to assess and help students to know how they are being assessed and on what information. Always going back to your standard to determine mastery. Our session review. At the outset of the module, we set goals that you would be able to define several key terms and concepts that are foundational to this series of modules, including what the modules identify as 5 elements of assessment design and validity and reliability. We discussed why teachers should focus on these 5 elements of assessment design and not the statistical concepts associated with validity and reliability as researchers and test makers apply them. We also set a goal of explaining the purpose of 2 tools that we reference throughout the modules, an assessment blueprint template and an assessment blueprint definition of how to work the assessment process. The next steps. Thinking about what you've learned today, how can this module and the assessment blueprint assist you in assessing mastery of your students in mastering the standards? What are some ways that you can implement this assessment blueprint as an individual, as a team of grade level or content area experts? And what are some additional areas of support that you will need to implement the assessment practices? These are some questions to consider as we close out this module. Here are some references that you can refer to if you'd like additional information. I would also like to point out that the last reference, the website for the U.S. Department of Education, that website there has additional resources and tools to assist you as you begin to plan your assessment process. And you can contact me at any time if you have any questions regarding this PowerPoint. Thank you.